Good afternoon, Year 11. Sorry I missed your lesson yesterday afternoon. I'm recording this on Tuesday evening, so it was earlier today. Unfortunately, someone in my household was sent home from work and has had to have a COVID test, so therefore I had to come home and isolate and await those test results. Hopefully they will come back fine and I will be back in school ASAP, hopefully by Thursday. In Wales, they're generally getting these results back quite quickly. But in the meantime, or in the event that I have to isolate for longer, if the test comes back positive, I'll be recording your lessons so that we don't end up with you falling behind. First thing I need to do is remind you that we have a mock exam on Tuesday. That mock exam is really important. It's important we get a record of a good grade for you, just in the small chance that we have to use that as your official grade at the end of the year. So please make sure, go to Google Classroom, have a look at the assignment I've set. It tells you what unit to revise for, so it's the urban unit, it's coasts, it's rivers, and also part of this development unit I've taught as well. I've also put links to revision resources on there, so there's no excuse for you to not know what you need to do and not have access to resources for you to revise. So today's lesson, we've been looking at how we can reduce the development gap, how we can make less developed countries catch up with more developed countries. And last lesson, you were completing the table and you were looking at different ways of reducing the development gap. So you looked at things like aid, how we could give aid to different countries. And we looked at what the benefits of giving aid were and what the drawbacks of giving aid were. We looked at foreign investment and how some companies might invest in countries and how that can be good because it creates jobs, but how also there might be negative because there might be strings attached to those investments. We looked at cancelling debt and other factors as well. We're going to spend a bit of time today, or the whole of today, looking at tourism and how tourism can be used as a tool to improve a country's development. So by the end of the lesson, you're going to understand how tourism helps reduce the development gap. Specifically, we're going to be looking at Gambia as a case study. In your exam, you have 9-mark questions in which you're expected to give examples or case studies that you studied. So this is one such case study that you'll be using. So the first thing as good geographers we should always do is we should always locate our case study. We should know where our case study is. We should be able to describe that location, and ideally we should also be able to draw a sketch map. So we've got two maps here, one world map in which you can see Gambia there, and then a zoomed in mapping in which you can see Gambia in the continent of Africa there in context with the other countries around it. So I've got a task for you here. It says using the maps, describe the location of Gambia. So the sorts of things you want to be talking about is which continent is it located in? What part of that continent? Is it north, south, east, west? What ocean is at the coast of the Gambia? What are its neighbouring countries? So perhaps if your cover teacher could press pause in a moment and then you can have some time to answer this question in your book. If you press pause now. Thank you. So hopefully you have answered that question. So now you've located the Gambia, and again in that 9-mark exam question, you know, the case study I studied was the Gambia is located in. So always make sure you put that context in. Before we kind of launch into more information about the Gambia and why people visit, I thought it'd be good to look at a climate graph for the Gambia and to see how good you are, how good your graph skills are, or your data analysis skills are. So over here we've got a climate graph for the Gambia. Climate graphs, in fact, we may have done one ourselves actually. I can't quite remember if we have or not. But anyway, climate graphs have two different bits of information, I suppose, two different axes. So on this side it shows the temperature, and the temperature is the red bar. So it's the red line rather, that we can see goes up and then goes down. This side is showing rainfall, and the rainfall is the blue bars. Along the bottom we've got months of the year. So we can see that in June the rainfall is just above 50 millimetres, maybe 55 millimetres, maybe 60. And the temperature in June, if we look, is there, so it's 28 degrees Celsius. So that's how we use a climate graph. If we look at this graph, we can see temperature-wise, okay, the values are going to be a lot warmer than the UK, a lot warmer, but you can see seasonally it kind of follows the UK. It's much warmer, or it is warmer in the summer months of June, July and August, and it kind of dips off in the autumn, in our autumn and winter. But let's have a look at the actual figures here. The range in temperature is very, very small. So the range in temperature only goes from 24 degrees Celsius up to a peak of just above 28 degrees Celsius. So it suggests it's a fairly warm country all year round. But let's look at the rainfall. This is a country that's exceptionally dry in January to May, and then again November to December, but it has a real wet season. I mean, almost 350 millimetres of rain fall in the month of August. That's a lot of rain that falls. Why am I going on about the climate of the Gambia? Well, because the climate of the Gambia will obviously impact whether tourists want to visit, and most importantly, when tourists want to visit. So in a moment, when I've explained the two questions, I'll ask your cover teacher to pause the PowerPoint again, or pause the video. I want you to answer these two questions. Using evidence from the climate graph, explain why tourist numbers may vary between the seasons in the Gambia. So, using evidence from the graph, so that means actual figures from the graph, so figures for rainfall, figures for temperature and actual months, quote data from the graph, and explain why tourists might visit in different seasons. So the obvious answer is, of course, well, if it's wet, people aren't going to want to visit. But you need to put more than that in your answer. Use actual data and times of the year. Second question, suggest why this could hinder the development of some groups living in the Gambia. So you've got to think about this. If tourists are going to avoid the Gambia, for example, if tourism becomes a major industry for the Gambia, and tourists decide they're going to avoid the Gambia in those very, very wet months, how could that hinder development of some groups? You should be thinking things like, well, seasonal jobs. If you work in a hotel as a waiter and there's no tourists coming in, you're probably not going to have any work in June, July, August and September. So is the work unreliable, or is the work seasonal? How is this country, how are these people going to get their income in the out of season work? So whereas, yes, it's great that people might have jobs in certain seasons, it also suggests that the Gambia needs to find other ways to make sure these workers have other forms of income in other parts of the year. There may be other ideas you can think about as well. So I'll stop talking now. If your cover teacher can pause the video and you can attempt to answer those two questions. Okay, so hopefully you've answered those two questions now. There we go. So you're going to complete this sheet during the rest of the lesson. It may run into tomorrow's lesson. It depends how efficient and how hard-working you're feeling today. So this sheet, which hopefully been printed out in A3, if it hasn't, you can always just write these subheadings in your book. There's no need to have the sheet if it hasn't been photocopied. So on this sheet, you're going to be putting in information about Gambia as the case study. So you're going to tell me first of all why people want to visit the Gambia. Why is it an attractive place for tourists? You're going to tell me what impact tourism has had on Gambia's development gap. So what has actually done to kind of close the development gap? You're going to tell me who's benefited from tourism in the Gambia. You're going to tell me if it's sustainable in the Gambia. So is tourism sustainable? So that means, is it something that can continue for years to come without causing damage to the economy or the environment or the culture of the people? There's also a few smaller boxes here when you need to tell me what the multiplier effect is. We actually mentioned that on Monday's lesson. Why is tourism so important for the Gambia? And then just some key facts to get some background knowledge. What's the population? What's the gross national income per capita? What's the life expectancy? What percentage of their whole gross domestic product is from tourism? Remember, gross domestic product is basically the value of the country. If you were to sell the Gambia, how much would it cost? So what percentage of all that value comes from tourism? Now, I've asked for a pack to be printed for you with lots of different information helps you answer these different questions. Obviously, when teachers aren't in, sometimes it's not possible to print all these resources out. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go through each slide of the resources which you need to allow you to see them. And then if needs be, if the pack has not been created, perhaps the cover teacher can pause the video on each slide so that you can read the information together and then fill out the appropriate box. I won't be able to read through all of the slides because I only have 15 minutes of recording time, 15 minutes of recording time to this particular app. So why do people want to visit the Gambia? So I'll just show you some pretty pictures first of why people want to go on holiday there. It looks absolutely lovely. This is one of the hotel complexes. It's obviously got lots of culture, lovely beaches. People are very very intrigued by visiting places that are now seen as perhaps more exotic. So traditionally people would just travel to Europe. Now people want to travel further abroad and visit other cultures. So key information about the Gambia. Again, if you need this slide, this tells you a little bit about the population and the GDP, etc., etc. So perhaps if you want to pause this and fill in the sheet, if you do not have the pack, that's fine. This next slide goes through why it's such a popular place to visit. So it talks about the weather, the beaches, some of the wildlife. So again, if you wish to pause to read this through as a class, if you need to. More information about why it's a popular place to visit, to do with its history. So again, if you wish to pause to read this as a class, if you need to. So far, you should have been able to fill in this key facts about the Gambia, or certainly most of those boxes there. You should have been able to fill in this box, which is why do people want to visit the Gambia. So what is the economy of the Gambia like? Again, I will pause this, or I would ask your cover teacher to pause this. This is if you don't have the work packs, which should have been printed for you. If not, you can pause this and read it as a class and then complete the appropriate part of the worksheet. This slide is all about how tourism has helped to reduce the development gap. And again, you should have this printed in your resource packs, but if not, I'll move my face out of the way. There we go. So you can actually pause this and you can read this as a class and then fill in the appropriate point on the sheet. So that's this box here that should have been filled out. Let's go to the next slide. There we go. So is tourism in the Gambia sustainable? So again, if you don't have this in your resource pack, if the cover teacher can pause this, you can read it as a class and then you can complete the A3 sheet. Fantastic. So hopefully now you should have been able to complete all of this sheet about the Gambia. I'll put this lesson onto Google Classroom as well for any students who are absent. This is an important case study. Tomorrow, or so be Thursday, I may well be in by your lesson if the test comes back in time. Your lesson is period 4, so fingers crossed. But if not, what we'll probably do is a case study specific on fair trade, maybe. So we've got another case study as an example of ways people can, or techniques people can use to reduce the development gap. Hopefully this video has been of some use. I hope you've not made fun of me too much. Hopefully I'll see you on Thursday, and if not, have a good weekend and do lots of revision.